Today we are going to rock on at Colorado Biodynamic Hemp. We're out in Palisade, Colorado, and we're going to go in and talk to Rory and learn a little bit about some of his plant growing philosophies. So let's go check it out. You nailing that?
My kind of take or philosophy on things when it comes to organic and sustainable and practicality and just the amalgamation of all those things seems to be, if it's in a container, I tend to grow hydro. I like having the control. I think that when you're limited by, the confines of a vessel, that your growth rates and your quality and everything seem to be elevated by a hydro approach or a aero hydro, whatever, different method, but basically inert media nudes as opposed to organic, soil building and that kind of thing. Now the other side of that is the second I go into the ground, like into the planet, I'm strictly organic. So that to me just makes sense. It's like, this is what we're doing, like why reinvent the wheel if you're going to put it in the ground? That's just how you do it, like the whole idea of conventional versus organic is pretty absurd. Organic is clearly the conventional, tried and true, original method, and to call it something different just has never made sense to me, and I think it's been pretty well illustrated that salt-based newts and fertilizer runoff and the effects it has on soil biology and all that kind of stuff ultimately end up hurting you, and the whole concept of everything. It's evident that going with the natural approach ultimately is far more sustainable. It's affordable, it's got a lot longer legs, as far as working, and it's gnarly to think that I saw this thing, is about how the food that we get these days, the produce, has only like 25% of the nutritional content that it should, because of the soil depletion being a primary, and then the whole practice of picking green and ripening on the truck. We're just shortchanging ourselves for it's pretty ridiculous if you look at it in those terms. It's far more sustainable to have small farms providing food where they live, in their backyard, that's high in nutritional content and fresh, than it is to do these big commercial ventures. And it stimulates the economy. Organic is important to me, but even more so I think selling local is really, keeping the money as close to home as you can is the best way for anybody to have a sustainable lifestyle or economy or all of that. It just makes sense, I think.
Yeah. Do you follow certified organic procedures, or do you supersede the organic?
I'm going off my moral compass there for the most part. So I've never actually certified anything that I personally have done as organic. It's something we've talked a lot about and I'm not opposed to. But I've also seen enough of it in various industries to realize that a lot of it's paperwork and doesn't really make a difference. The certification versus following good practice. It's from a moral standpoint, it's like if you grow it organic, it's organic in my mind. But then there's labeling issues and things of that nature that become a thing. And the guys who go through the trouble to get certified defend their place in the market pretty strongly, and don't want people who aren't certified using the wrong vocabulary, which is, understandable to a degree. I get it. But at the same time, when you see guys just jacking the price up because they're certified, not because they did anything different as far as growing, it's, you got to question it. Soil fertility, or just soil health, soil texture, soil the nature of the soil here in the Grand Valley is it's pretty subpar. You know, I mean, honestly, we're fortunate, and then we're one of the few spots in Colorado that has a long enough growing season to where you can, you know, achieve a sustainable kind of growing environment. But between the heat and the soil, the only reason that really flies is because of irrigation and a lot of, I guess, just brute force and ignorance on the part of people insisting on growing, because, you know, clay and salt are not good mediums for plants, you know, and that's basically all we got. You know, I mean, I know a lot of people who like to talk about no-till and living soil and all this kind of thing, and that's what we're all working towards, I think, as, you know, as growers. But here, where we're at geographically, that's not a starting point. You know, I mean, it takes a long time and a lot of work. You know, I mean, you're basically starting as a reclamation project, you know, whether it's been farmed ground prior, or it's been fallow or whatever. I mean, there's different approaches at that point, but none of them are like, you know, living someplace that's got this amazing soil where you just stick stuff in the ground and it grows. You know, I mean, it takes a lot of work. And, you know, I think, as I said, going from an organic standpoint, once you go into the ground, into the planet, what your real job is more, has nothing to do with what you're growing. It has to do with, like, fostering the soil. You know, I mean, you're basically a steward of the soil, and your real job is to grow microbes, not plants. Like, the plants are the easy part almost at that point. You know, I mean, if you focus on, you know, building a real healthy microbe environment, you know, rhizosphere, whatever the kind of root zone is, that's where the results come from. That's where your work will be seen. You know, I mean, and it's tricky because it turns out microbes don't like salt. They like this thing called drainage. Clay does not. You know, I mean, so it takes some doing. You know, adding organic material is one of those things that's great when you're a gardener. But when you look at doing that in terms of acreage, you know, one, it's demanding of your time and your wallet, and it's also just plain difficult. Like, where do you source enough material to actually make a difference? And at the end of the day, like, soil reclamation is not anything fast. You know, it's like, it takes years, not days or months, or, you know,
More commitment.
Yeah, it's a long haul, you know, and to get to that no-till living soil place, you know, even if you bust your ass, it's going to take you 5 or 10 years before you can say it and actually mean what you say. You know, I mean, along the way you're working towards it, you'll see milestones of progress, and it'll be part of things. But, you know, you go someplace either in the Northeast or the Northwest where they have, you know, really healthy soil kind of dominating the landscape, it's a way different story. But here, you know, what do, you know?
What methods have you used to incorporate more microbes into the soil?
You know, to do that in an economically viable way is the real obstacle. And I've done a lot of tea making, a lot of, you know, propagating of as local a microbe as possible. So the microbes that are already here are the ones that are used to the soil conditions, the ones that'll do the best. So if you can take stuff from your field and propagate it, return it to the field in mass, and get that going, it'll evolve. As the soil health improves, the microbe environment evolves along with it. So as long as you're just propagating what you got, I feel like that's the kind of the basis of it. You know, I mean, there's a select few microbes that are tried and true, like plant beneficials, that I think a lot of companies will take and make a blend or an isolated version of and propagate the shit out of it. And, you know, you put it out there and it's like, it helps, but all you're doing is just charging up that one particular microbe, when at the end of the day there's millions of different ones. And you want balance, you know, I mean, you don't want all of one thing, you want a lot of everything. And that, I think, is like where it comes to soil health is really what you're after, and it's tough because sometimes there's economic gains by doing something faster, whatever, and it's all organic at that point, so you're not really hurting anything. But I think ultimately, looking at the big picture that way, the full spectrum is where you're really going to achieve the goal. It is by nurturing all aspects of it, not just a couple.
So when you say making teas, is that a compost tea, or are you taking a tea from your native soil to propagate microbes?
All the above. I'd like to think I've got enough of a handle on different things where I'll prescribe different kinds of things for different situations. And I get lucky once in a while maybe, but I think at the end of the day, there's not too many instances where a lot of everything isn't going to do just as well as a lot of one thing, as far as like instant results and that kind of thing. So yeah, I do both stuff from around here, which gets tougher as the season goes on and things dry out. The microbial environment, becomes a little less frugal or less accessible perhaps, but it's still here, and the other thing is pulling stuff from up higher where there's a little more moisture and you have more in the way of wood decomposition and kind of fungal activity. Plants respond well to that.
So going up the alpine zone, gathering leaf debris,
exactly,
plant matter.
Some people go mushroom hunting and some people just hunt mycelia and rotten logs.
Yeah.
And I find that that's the one thing that's like not immediately local that I seek out. Worm castings and all that stuff are always an easy one because they're available usually and they're great. Because they tend to have a big spectrum as well, as far as the purchase products, like the lab propagated microbe products that are, marketed pretty heavily at this point, they're good products, but they're very expensive, which, puts a dent in your sustainability in a hurry.
Sure.
And it's tough because you get in this mindset that, oh, I need that. And you think that that's the answer. And more often than not, it seems like that's kind of a mistake. It's you get tunnel vision pretty easy when doing that, and it's expensive, a lot of those products are marketed to people, not to plants, it's a fun crop to grow, but so are all crops really, the neat thing about growing is the not instant gratification, but certainly like near future gratification. Like you get to always see results relatively quickly. Like maybe not that second, but like in the days that follow, whatever work you do, you see the fruits of that. You monitor the growth. You do that all the way till harvest, and then you're like, damn, that's cool. I did that, or I helped that, and that's rewarding. And I'd like to say that there's more to life than money, but it sure helps.
Yeah.
It's freedom essentially, and I've been pretty fortunate to get away with living a pretty free lifestyle. So I'd have to attribute that in some way, I guess, to my choice or being chosen or whatever.
Nice. All right.